Liquidators. On April 26, 1986, an accident occurred at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. As a result of the explosion in Unit 4, the reactor was destroyed, and it led to a large-scale release of radioactive substances. International Chernobyl Disaster Remembrance Day is dedicated to this date. Every year on April 26, we pay tribute to all the liquidators of radiation accidents. About 600,000 people from over the Soviet Union took part in the liquidation of the consequences of the Chernobyl disaster. Risking their lives and health, military and civilian specialists performed combat missions in the disaster zone. Among them were fire crews, crews of army helicopters and civil aviation, engineers, protective structures builders, welders, dosimetrists, meteorologists, military chemists, drivers, doctors, miners, policemen and many others. A government commission under the leadership of the USSR's Council of Ministers Deputy Chairman Boris Yevdokimovich Sherbina was established to eliminate the consequences of the accident. Multifunctional grouping of forces and means was formed. The Commission organized evacuation of people from the red area, localization of the source of the accident, decontamination of the territory, emergency work, repair and restoration work, medical examination and accommodation of the population. In the first minutes of the accident, Alexander Lelichenko, deputy head of the NPP electrical workshop, cut off the supply of hydrogen to the engine room and ensured the safe operation of the remaining NPP units. Shift supervisor of Unit 4, Alexander Akimov, called firefighters and ambulance crews, turned off the equipment of the unit. Together with Alexander Nihaev, Arkady Uskov, Vyacheslav Orlov, Vladimir Chugunov and Leonid Toptunov, he opened the shut-off valves of the reactor cooling system. Deputy head of the turbine hall Razim Davletbaev organized the discharge of turbine oil and emergency displacement of hydrogen from the generator. Machinist Vyacheslav Brazhnik blocked the oil pipeline. Turbine equipment operators Yuri Vishinin, Alexander Novik and Andrei Tormazin turned off the oil system pumps, which made it possible to localize the fire. Unit 3 shift supervisor Yuri Bagdasarov stopped the third power unit and prevented the spread of the accident. The assignment of the Chernobyl NPP Fire Department 2 under the command of Lieutenant Vladimir Pravik and the city of Pripyat Fire Department 6, led by Lieutenant Viktor Kibel, were alerted. The head of the Fire Department 2, Major Leonid Telatnikov, led the firefighting. Thanks to the precise actions of 28 fighters, it was possible to localize the fire, save the engine room and the third power unit. Firefighter Vasily Ignatenko, at the cost of his life, pulled 3 comrades who lost consciousness from radiation exposure out of the fire. Following the firefighters, army aviation pilots, many of whom went through the war in Afghanistan, were among the first to enter the battle with the nuclear element. Helicopter pilots lowered dosimetric devices into the reactor, took soil and water samples, extinguished fires, conducted decontamination work, dumped more than 5,000 tons of boron, dolomite and sand into the reactor shaft. The release of radioactive elements has decreased hundreds of times. After extinguishing the reactor, work on the localization of the accident was carried out on an unprecedented scale and complexity. From the first day, academician Valery Alexeyevich Legasov, the first deputy director of the Kurchatov Institute, worked at the accident site. He developed the composition of a special mixture for throwing into the reactor zone and calculated the possibility of its use to reduce emissions of radioactive aerosols. Colonel General Vladimir Pikalov and his deputy Major General Anatoly Kuntsevich coordinated the activities of chemical troops in the affected area. Work on the collection, transportation and burial of radioactive waste was carried out. Dust suppression, concreting of affected areas, decontamination of machinery, equipment, settlements and traffic routes were undertaken. Dosimetric control of personnel was conducted. To prevent radioactive substances from entering water sources, hydraulic structures were built. Depending on the radiation situation in different zones, it was possible to work from 1 minute to several hours. People, without sparing themselves, worked where robots couldn't stand. They gave their all. The work was carried out around the clock. In a short time, from July to November 1986, a special protective structure was built over the destroyed fourth power unit, a sarcophagus, the so-called shelter. The construction of the shelter was the result of the dedicated work of more than 90,000 designers, builders and installers. Donetsk, Tula, Kemerovo miners and Moscow metro builders brought a 136-meter tunnel for a retaining plate and a heat exchanger with forced cooling under the reactor within a month. The tragedy brought everyone together. The whole country helped to cope with the big trouble. More than 240,000 liquidators arrived at the Chernobyl NPP from Russia, 70,000 from Belarus, 32,000 from Kazakhstan, 8,000 from Azerbaijan, 6,000 from Tajikistan, 5,000 from Georgia, 3,500 from Moldova, more than 3,000 from Kyrgyzstan and Armenia. The troops of the Belarusian, Kiev, Odessa, Moscow, Leningrad, Carpathian, Central Asian, Baltic, Volga, North Caucasian, Siberian, Ural and Transbaikal military districts participated in the liquidation of the consequences of the Chernobyl disaster. The Eternal troops guarded the nuclear power plant and the perimeter of the exclusion zone. Together with the police, they participated in the evacuation of residents, patrolled the streets, checked vehicles. Soviet aid, mainly special equipment, also came from our friends from abroad. The participants of the liquidation of the accident, through their selfless, courageous and professional actions in deadly conditions, saved the lives of millions of people from radioactive contamination. Ordinary Soviet people who didn't consider themselves heroes were the basis of everything. Fulfilling their duty, surrounded by invisible death in infected areas, the liquidators stopped the further spread of radiation. It was victory in a terrible war, the victory of the Soviet people on behalf of all mankind. Dear liquidators, we express our heartfelt gratitude and appreciation for your heroic feat. We bow our heads before the memory of your fallen comrades.